welcome to the deep dive. Think about the last time you felt that sudden, just awful drop in your stomach.
Oh, yeah, that visceral reaction.
Right. You know the exact feeling, that tight, suffocating pressure in your chest when you are terrified of not meeting expectations. Or maybe you're just dreading doing something you have, never ever done before.
And it's paralyzing, honestly.
It really is. So if you are nodding along right now, whether you're driving to work or just making your morning coffee, today's mission is entirely custom tailored for you. We're going to explore how to take one of the absolute most uncomfortable human experiences and, well, actually turn it into a superpower.
It really is a profound shift in perspective. I mean,
Yeah.
when you understand the mechanics of what is happening in your body and your brain, you stop being a victim of your own nervous system.
Right, you take the power back.
Exactly. And the material we are looking at today provides a very practical roadmap for how to do exactly that.
It does. So our deep dive today is grounded in a frankly phenomenal piece from the widely respected Retrieving Thoughts blog. Specifically, we are digging into one of their absolute best, most heavily cited articles titled Fear as a Pathway to Professional Growth.
It's a great piece.
It completely upends how we are taught to view anxiety in the workplace and honestly just in our everyday lives.
Yeah, and to really understand how to utilize this, we have to start at the biological baseline, right? The foundation here relies heavily on the work of Ledoux from the year 2000, which reminds us that fear is not some modern professional defect.
Right. It's not a bug, it's a future.
Exactly. It's not a sign of weakness. It is one of our fundamental basic emotions. If you look at the psychological consensus, fear sits right alongside anger, disgust, happiness, sadness, and surprise. It is deeply primal.
Okay, let's unpack this, because if you're picturing those basic emotions right now, hands up if you immediately pictured them as the characters from Pixar's movie Inside Out.
Yes. It is the perfect visual representation for what is happening neurologically.
It really is. Think about the character of Fear in that movie. He isn't a villain. He's this, hyper-vigilant, jittery little guy in a bow tie whose entire evolutionary job is to keep the main character alive.
Right. He's just doing his job.
It's constantly scanning the horizon for threats. And that is exactly how our actual human evolution played out. These basic emotions developed to help us make rapid, life-saving judgments about stimuli.
So we don't get eaten.
Yeah, they quickly guide our behavior so we don't end up as a tiger's lunch.
Precisely. The amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, it fires up and floods your body with adrenaline and cortisol. The problem, of course, is that while we are no longer running from apex predators on the savannah, that exact same hypervigilant system is still firing.
Oh, all the time.
Right. Your brain cannot distinguish between a charging tiger and, say, a passive-aggressive email from your boss.
Which feels like a tiger sometimes.
It really does. And that brings us to the modern application of this primal emotion. Drawing on a framework by Cloak and Goldsmith from 2011, we see that instead of the old, exhausted cliche of fighting the fear, we need a four-step process.
Okay, what are the steps?
It's expressing, acknowledging, reframing, and integrating fear.
Expressing is the obvious one, right? Just verbally admitting that you are scared. Naming it to tame it.
Right. But acknowledging it is where the real psychological work begins. Acknowledging fear requires profound self-awareness. It means taking a hard, honest look at the roots of our anxiety and how it actively manipulates our behavior.
And our decisions, yeah.
Exactly. The key to this step is practicing deep self-compassion. You have to accept that feeling fear is simply your biology doing its job and avoid the harsh self-criticism that usually follows. Only then can you move to the third step, which is reframing.
I am going to have to stop you right there.
Yeah.
Because this is where the entire concept really rubs me the wrong way. I have to push back on this heavily.
Oh, okay. Go ahead. What's the sticking point for you?
This whole concept of reframing fear, it sounds exactly like toxic corporate positivity. Think about the everyday adult life tasks we all deal with. Let's say your bank suddenly blocks your credit card while you are trying to pay for groceries. Or your car breaks down on a busy highway.
Sure. Real stressors.
Or you are having a massive screaming conflict with a neighbor. When someone is in the middle of a genuine crisis, telling them to just reframe it and have a growth mindset feels incredibly dismissive.
I see where you're coming from.
It minimizes real paralyzing anxiety. When my car is smoking on the side of the road, I don't want a growth opportunity. I want a tow truck.
What's fascinating here is that your reaction is entirely natural, but it completely misses the actual mechanism of what reframing is. This isn't corporate speak, it is clinical science.
Really? How so?
It's heavily rooted in research from the Beck Institute for Cognitive Behavior Therapy. Reframing isn't about ignoring the very real practical threat of a broken down car. You still call the tow truck.
Okay, good.
Right. Reframing is about removing the bias of discomfort.
A bias of discomfort. Walk me through what that actually means in the brain.
In cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, the goal isn't to pretend everything is sunshine and rainbows. The goal is to identify and challenge the negative thought patterns that cascade from that initial jolt of fear.
Okay.
The physical discomfort of fear, the racing heart, the shallow breathing, it biases your brain to only see catastrophe. You stop seeing a broken car and start seeing a ruined week, a drained bank account, a total downward spiral.
I've definitely been there.
We all have. Reframing separates the physiological panic from the factual reality of the situation. You're creating a gap between the stimulus and your response.
But hang on. It's incredibly easy for us to sit here in a calm studio and talk about identifying thought patterns and creating a gap. I challenge you to apply that to a real work scenario in the heat of the moment.
Give me an example.
Let's say I have a massive monthly company presentation. I am standing at the podium, my throat is dry, the executives are staring at me, and I am terrified. How does clinical science help me there? My brain isn't doing cognitive behavioral therapy. It's screaming at me to flee.
Right.
How am I supposed to just switch off that panic?
You don't switch it off because it isn't a switch. It is a muscle. And the CBT approach would ask you to look at the physiological arousal you are feeling right at that podium. The racing heart, the sweaty palms. What is actually happening biologically?
I'm freaking out.
Well, your body is flooding with cortisol and adrenaline, but here's the secret. The physical sensation of fear is almost entirely identical to the physical sensation of excitement.
Wait, really? The biology is the same?
Almost identical. It is the context you provide that determines how you experience it. That racing heart means you care deeply about the topic and your performance. Your body is mobilizing energy because this matters to you. It is preparing you to perform. If you have built the muscle of reframing before you step to the podium, you can take that exact same nervous energy your body is already producing and channel it.
Channel it how?
You mentally label it excitement and use it to project your voice and animate your gestures. You objectively increase your chances of success.
So the threat of messing up is still there, but I am fundamentally changing my relationship to the physical feeling in my body.
Exactly. You are viewing it as a biological response to stepping out of your comfort zone, not as a prophecy of failure. It boosts your confidence because you are taking the energy your amygdala is throwing at you and using it constructively.
Okay, I actually concede that point. That makes a lot of sense.
It changes everything.
It does. If I think about those daily adult life tasks, viewing a blocked bank card as a challenge rather than a threat actually returns agency to me.
Yes, exactly.
A threat means I am a passive victim of my circumstances. A challenge means it's a puzzle I can actively solve. That is a massive neurological difference.
It is the difference between stagnation and growth. And if we take that mechanism, turning threats into puzzles, how does that apply to the big existential issues we deal with in our careers?
Right.
The research actually categorizes how this plays out professionally into 3 very specific areas we need to dissect. The first, and arguably the most pervasive, is the fear of failure.
Which is the big one. And it's entirely rational. The fear of failure is fueled by the potential for very real negative consequences. We are talking about losing your livelihood, damaging a hard-earned reputation, or facing severe financial instability.
It's terrifying.
It is no wonder this fear prevents incredibly talented people from taking risks.
Absolutely. But this is where we have to look at the modern corporate concept of failing fast.
I have to say, whenever I hear fail fast, it always makes me think of playing a tough video game.
How so? Connect that for us.
Think about the psychological safety of a video game. When you are playing a difficult level and your character runs into a room and gets immediately taken out by a hidden trap, you don't throw the console in the trash and quit playing forever.
Right, you try again.
You respawn. And when you respawn, you have a massive advantage. You know exactly where the trap is, you failed fast, but you use that failure as actionable data. The fear of failure is low because the environment expects you to learn through trial and error.
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize it. Failure is simply data collection. But to actually achieve that video game respawn mentality in the high-stakes workplace, you have to actively change how your brain processes the task.
How do you do that?
You do this by breaking down large, intimidating projects into smaller, manageable milestones. When you seek continuous feedback on those small milestones, you drastically reduce the fear of uncertainty.
Because the stakes are lower.
Exactly. You aren't risking the whole game, you are just testing one room for traps.
So if failing fast solves the fear of messing up a specific project, what happens when the project is your entire life? Because it seems like the stakes for choosing the wrong career path cause a completely different type of paralysis. We aren't just talking about a bad presentation anymore.
No, we are talking about the fear of making wrong decisions. This maps perfectly onto a psychological concept from Albion and Fogarty from 2002 known as career anxiety.
Oh man, if you are listening to this on your commute right now, sitting in traffic on your way to a job you absolutely can't stand, this part is for you. Career anxiety sounds like the exact thing that keeps people staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m.
It does. We spend half of our waking lives at work. Yet many people are profoundly unhappy with their career path, but they're entirely paralyzed by the sunk cost fallacy and perfectionism.
Right.
This fear of making the wrong choice leads to deep analysis paralysis. They research forever, but never make a move.
So how do we break the paralysis? Because just make a choice isn't helpful advice for someone who is terrified.
You break it by following a structured hierarchy. It's a 5-step pyramid of decision-making. It starts at the wide base. Do your research and gather objective data. Step 2, seek advice from seasoned experts. Step 3, make a concrete plan, carefully considering the consequences of each path.
Makes sense so far.
Step 4, remain flexible and prepared to make changes. And the final tip of the pyramid, trust your instincts.
Oh, come on. I violently object to that last step. Trust your instincts.
Hear me out.
If you are a chronically anxious person, your instincts are completely broken. If I am standing at a massive career crossroads and I trust my instincts are just going to tell me to run away, hide under the covers, and stay at the miserable job because it's familiar.
That's a very valid point.
Anxiety masquerades as intuition all the time.
You are absolutely right that anxiety mimics intuition, which is precisely why trust your instincts is at the very top of the pyramid and not the bottom. Remember, this is a hierarchy.
Okay, clarify that mechanism for me. Because right now, trusting my gut sounds like a recipe for disaster.
If you jump straight to your instincts without doing the work, yes, your hypervigilant amygdala will dictate your choice based on fear. But look at the base of the pyramid. You only trust your instincts after you have gathered the data,
Okay.
after you have consulted experts, after you have outlined a flexible plan. By the time you reach the top of the pyramid, you have systematically stripped away the irrational panic by providing your brain with logical safety nets.
I see.
The instinct you are trusting at that point is an informed, educated intuition, not just a blind biological panic response.
Here's where it gets really interesting for me then. Because the ultimate cure for analysis paralysis isn't finding the perfect, risk-free answer. It's just making an informed choice, taking action, and learning from the results as you go.
Exactly.
You can't steer a parked car. You have to start moving to know if you're going the right direction.
Exactly. You have to put the car in drive. And if an individual can become entirely paralyzed by that fear of making the wrong move, imagine what happens when that paralysis infects an entire corporate culture. That brings us to the third professional fear, the fear of innovation.
This one feels so much broader. It's systemic.
It is the fear of the unknown operating at scale. Most innovations inherently challenge the status quo. They bring the terrifying uncertainty of untested outcomes and the very real potential that changes might actually destroy a profitable system.
Right.
This fear traps entire organizations in known patterns, even when those patterns are clearly marching them toward obsolescence. To explain this phenomenon, we have to look at Clayton Christensen's landmark work, The Innovator's Dilemma.
Christensen's work is fascinating because he highlighted a terrifying paradox for business leaders. He argued that massive, successful companies don't fail because they are lazy or run by incompetent executives. They fail precisely because they do everything right.
Yeah, if we connect this to the bigger picture, think about the fiduciary duty of a CEO. A good business listens intently to its most profitable customers. It invests heavily in its most profitable products.
Makes sense.
It strives for continuous, incremental improvement. But by rationally prioritizing those short-term gains, they become completely blind and vulnerable to disruptive innovations.
I always think of it like massive cargo ships versus tiny speedboats.
Mhm.
Established companies are these enormous, highly profitable cargo ships. They are incredibly efficient at moving straight ahead on their established routes.
A great analogy.
But a disruptive startup is a little speedboat.
Hmm.
It might be loud, it might be messy, and it might be serving a tiny, weird niche market that the cargo ship doesn't care about.
Right. The cargo ship ignores the speedboat because the speedboat isn't carrying enough cargo to matter yet.
Exactly. But then the speedboat discovers a faster, uncharted shortcut. Suddenly the whole market wants to go that way.
Mhm.
But the cargo ship is too massive. It physically cannot pivot fast enough to take the new route, and it crashes.
Yep.
The leaders of the cargo ship feared the uncertainty of the uncharted waters, so they clung to the safe route until it was too late.
Which is why addressing this deep-seated fear of innovation requires a fundamental shift in company culture. Organizations have to create a psychological environment where the video game respawn mentality is real.
Where it's safe to fail.
Yes. Where experimentation is valued, where resources are dedicated to taking calculated risks, and where both success and failure are treated as vital data rather than punishable offenses.
All right, we have argued over the psychology, we've unpacked the neuroscience of cognitive behavioral therapy, and we have diagnosed how fear paralyzes both individuals and massive cargo ship corporations.
You've covered a lot.
But I want to bring this right down to earth. So what does this all mean for the listener right now? If someone is sitting at their desk dealing with a wave of professional anxiety, how do they actually build this CBT muscle in their daily life?
There are practical, everyday integration techniques you can start using immediately. The first is to actively simulate the worst-case scenario.
I had to chuckle at this part of the research. It brings up Murphy's Law. Anything that can go wrong will go wrong, and pairs it with that classic dad advice. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst.
It does sound intensely pessimistic at first.
It does, but it is actually incredibly liberating.
Walk us through the cognitive mechanism of that. Why does pessimism equal liberation?
Because when you are gripped by anxiety, your brain is just screaming danger into the void. It is a vague, formless terror. But when you actually sit down and simulate the absolute worst possible outcome, say, I fail this presentation, I lose my biggest client, and I get fired, and then you force yourself to outline a step-by-step plan B for that exact scenario.
You realize you're okay.
You realize you won't literally die. You would update your resume, you would call your contacts, you would budget your savings. Having a concrete plan B reduces that desperate claustrophobic feeling. The situation is rarely as apocalyptic as the initial wave of panic suggests.
That is textbook CBT. You are confronting the irrational fear with structured logic. You are giving the prefrontal cortex control over the amygdala. Another powerful way to do that is by utilizing SMART goals, goals that are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound.
We hear the SMART acronym all the time in corporate training, but what is the actual mechanism there? How does making a goal measurable stop me from being afraid?
It goes right back to removing ambiguity. When a task is massive and vague, like grow the business or change careers, your hypervigilant brain sees an insurmountable mountain. It feeds on that ambiguity.
Oh, definitely.
But when you make a goal highly specific and measurable, like reach out to 3 contacts on LinkedIn by Friday, your brain stops seeing a terrifying monster and starts seeing a simple checklist. You get a small hit of dopamine every time you check an item off, which actively counteracts the stress hormones.
You are literally hacking your own neurochemistry by celebrating small victories. That builds massive momentum.
Precisely. You also have to hack your physical nervous system. This means practicing active relaxation techniques like deep breathing or meditation.
Which connects perfectly to what we discussed at the very beginning. If your amygdala is screaming that a tiger is in the room, taking slow, deep breaths stimulates the vagus nerve.
Yes, the mind-body connection.
It physically signals your nervous system that you are actually safe. It lowers your heart rate and clears the mind so you can make rational choices instead of reactive ones.
Exactly. And the final technique is perhaps the most difficult for high achievers. You have to ask for help. Seeking advice from someone who is objectively more experienced with the task at hand is not a sign of incompetence.
Letting your ego or your fear of looking ignorant lead you into a completely preventable failure is the real mistake. Asking for help is actually a power move. It shows you value the outcome more than your pride.
It absolutely is. And as we synthesize all of this, there is a brilliant piece of pop culture analogy that I think we can both find total consensus on to wrap this up. It involves Star Wars.
Yes. Total consensus on this. You cannot reject the dark side without knowing it first. I passionately agree with this framing. Think about Luke Skywalker having to go into the dark cave on Dagobah.
A classic scene.
He asks Yoda what's in there, and Yoda says, "Only what you take with you." He had to face the projection of Darth Vader, his ultimate fear, to understand himself. Fear is integral to the journey. The goal of all the CBT and the planning and the reframing isn't to magically eliminate fear or pretend it doesn't exist. The goal is to learn how to navigate it.
Fear doesn't have to be a barrier that stops you cold. If we understand its biological nature and employ these logical strategies, we integrate it into our decision-making. We transform it from a paralyzing, destructive force into a high-octane catalyst for genuine growth and innovation.
It is a total paradigm shift. And honestly, we have only just scratched the surface of this incredibly rich Retrieving Thoughts blog post. There is so much more nuance in the text, so much more detail on the specific clinical studies, and we highly encourage you to check it out. The link to the full article is right down in the description for you to explore on your own.
To synthesize the key takeaways we have uncovered today. First, recognize that fear is a primal biological mechanism meant to guide us, not stall us. Second, by utilizing cognitive behavioral therapy techniques, we can intentionally separate our physical panic from reality, reframing what our brain perceives as threats into actionable challenges.
Love that.
And finally, whether you are facing the fear of failure, the career anxiety of making a wrong decision, or the systemic fear of innovation, the antidote remains the same. Thorough preparation, stripping away ambiguity, and ultimately taking action.
You can't steer a parked car. I love that.
But I want to leave you with one final provocative angle to ponder as you go about your week. If fear is simply your brain's biological way of highlighting what truly matters most to your growth, what is the one thing you are most afraid of doing at work right now? And what does that fear tell you about what you actually need to do next?
That is a phenomenal question to leave off on. If you're scared of it, it probably means you need to do it. Thanks for taking this plunge with us. Keep questioning, keep learning, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.